Erev Tov to everybody. I will take over here.
Okay, Erev
Thanks
Tov.
for everybody showing up with all the technological difficulties. Those who haven't received the email, I posted on the chat the text that we're going to be discussing today, which, as per usual already, this is the third time. It's already as we call in Gemara language, a chazaka. It's a strong continuation. With the third lesson, which we're dealing with Avot de-Rabbi Natan. For those who are newcomers here, I will just mention again, Avot de-Rabbi Natan is kind of the best description would be like a Talmud on Masechet Avot, and like the Talmud, it often deals with intricate wording of the Mishnah and interpretations of it. Sometimes it will expand the conversation around the Mishnah, like we saw in previous lessons, and sometimes it will go on a total tangent that has very little to do with the Mishnah, although it definitely it loosely connects to the Mishnah, but really it's independent topic, like we saw in last week's class about it went on a tangent about telling us stories about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his grandson visiting the sick or being told off by ugly people. Today, because this course is very short, and I just wanted to do cherry picking of the different styles of work that needs to be done about Avot de-Rabbi Natan. Today's lesson will be again totally different than the people from the past lessons. I'll repost the again in the chat for those who just came in now. This lesson will deal with Avot de-Rabbi Natan, but it will be part of a larger conversation to do with the very last days of right before the destruction of the temple, the second temple by Cheni, and specifically about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leaving Jerusalem and going to Yavne. Just to put things into context, we know that from other sources, we have historical evidence besides Jewish Talmudic proof. We know that the Romans waged a war against the Jews of Jerusalem already from the year 66, or late 66, beginning of 67. We know that battle of the first rebellion against the Jews, as they called it, lasted quite a few years. In the middle of it, the destruction, or perhaps the pinnacle of it, would be the destruction of the temple in year 70. So we know that the ongoing war was 3 years, about 3 years before the destruction of the temple. We also know that as a result of the destruction of the temple, a new Jewish center has happened. It's called Yavne. And the city of Yavne was filled with sages, Tanaic sages, and many point at that moment as the beginning of the Tanaim. So if we look in Pirkei Avot, we know that we know the term of Anshe Knesset Gdola, the people of the beginning of the Second Temple era, and they were leaders. Then we know about the couples like Hillel and Shammai and Shmaya Avtalion. We know the presidents that continued for generations, starting with Hillel and Rabban Gamliel, or Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, and again Rabban Gamliel, and again Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, ending with Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. But what actually surprisingly happened is that we know a lot more people. Like we know a lot of people who spoke in the Mishnah times. I'll say Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Nechemia, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Lezer. There are many Tanaim who started speaking in Mishnah, and that is a very big change from what we know in Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot, it almost sounds like there are two people, they're important two people, and we don't know much about the rest. And suddenly, we suddenly hear about more than just two people, a Nasi and an Av Beit Adin, the president of the Jewish community and the head of the judicial court. We suddenly hear about a lot more people. Now, that transition isn't par chance. That transition happens at the destruction of the temple, a little bit before and mainly after, because Jerusalem is no longer the center. We suddenly have a new center, and eventually the center moves around. But then the first place the new center appears is the city of Yavne. And in Yavne, Torah Shebaal Peh, as we know it, totally changes. And again, anybody opening up a Mishnah can sense it. But if you specifically want to talk about, there are certain things that we hear about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, who single-handedly changed the nature of Jewish practice to the fact that if the times of the Mishnah, in times of Bet HaMikdash, we would blow shofar only on Shabbat in the temple. Suddenly he says you should do it elsewhere as well. If then he has a few ways of reestablishing actions that were only linked to the Bet HaMikdash. Suddenly they're elsewhere. Perhaps the most clear one is we suddenly have davening, which we're not sure happened in the time of Bet HaMikdash. But even if it did, it definitely wasn't as well established and put together like we suddenly have a very fixed davening with 18 or 19 brachot that we say 3 times a day. All that is happening in Yavne, and all that is happening as a result of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he's the topic of our class today, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, who leaves Jerusalem and establishes a new center for Jewish life. Center, not just because it's geographically different, but because its focal point is different. It's no longer surrounded around the temple and about Avodat Bet HaMikdash. It's suddenly surrounded about other things like Torah. The place where Avot de-Rabbi Natan speak about this is not surprising, about a Mishnah that says, Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed, al Torah, v'al avodah, v'al gmilut chasadim. The world stands on 3 legs: Torah, avodah, not like Bnei Akiva avodah of working the land, but rather avodah like Bet HaMikdash, sacrifices in the Bet HaMikdash, and gmilut chasadim. Now that statement is earth-shattering because simply the answer is, what is the world relying on? Avodat HaMikdash. And suddenly the Mishnah and Avot says, no, it's 3 pillars. And even if you lost one in losing the temple, you still have 2 others. And the world can continue surviving based on those two pillars alone. So that's how the Mishnah and the Avot de Natan link this to our conversation. But what I want to talk about is really the Aggadic description of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leaving Yerushalayim. And here, till now, I mentioned things that are clear. They're historical facts. Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. Year 70. The Romans are responsible. The Romans waged a 3-year war before the destruction of the temple against the Jews. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is in Yavne, and Yavne is a new center. No one can dispute any of these facts. Those are facts. They're proven from multiple sources, both within the Jewish realm of the lore of Gemara, Midrash, Avot de-Rabbi Natan, and from external sources like Josephus or Roman history books. I mean, there's no doubt about this happening. The question that many researchers discuss is, when we hear about this from Jewish sources like the Talmud or the Midrash, are those historical sources or not? Now, one can debate this, and I'm not a very big historian. I'm actually not a historian at all. And but from my experience, there's really very little debate. The Gemara isn't a history book, just like the Tanakh is not a history book. These books are literary giants giving you ideas. Often ideas use a medium of history to give over the idea. But their goal isn't history. Their goal is idea. And therefore, don't be swayed by the historical facts brought and say, oh, it must have happened. The Gemara said it happened, and therefore it must be true. I'm not sure it's true. I mean, I'm not sure that the Gemara is aiming to give you a historical fact, and therefore, by the mere fact that they're saying it doesn't necessarily mean that they expect you to realize that it's truth. Now, I know perhaps I'm being very brazen and a little bit too much skeptical. However, today we're going to learn a story that has three versions and three different descriptions about what actually happened in year 70 with Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. The story, the different sources that we use don't depict the same painting. So what do historians do? They'll say, okay, we have three different systems, three different descriptions. Let's find the common denominator in all three, and that must have happened because all three agree. So although we have 10 other facts that they don't agree about, so I will put into doubt about the other 10 facts, but the three facts that they agree on, that must be truth. And again, I'm using the humility hat and say, Ani lo batuach. I'm not certain that that's the case, because if a story tells you 10 facts and 7 are not corroborated, so even the 3 are corroborated, how do you know those 3 happened? Maybe all 10 are not historical facts. And it doesn't really shock me that it won't be a historical fact, because I don't think the Gemara is trying to tell you a historical fact. So that's me just being a very cautious reader and reading with the hat of a person that is recognizing the limitation of the sources in front of me and their goals, and therefore what they're not trying to do as well, which I believe it is a historical fact. And the title of the class that I gave when I sent out, and those who received it, Mitzriyan, and those who didn't, now you hear it. I wrote History in the Eyes of the Teller. And I believe that we have here 3 different descriptions because we have 3 different authors with 3 different, I will say, agendas or points of view. And therefore, they are telling me their historical or pseudo-historical facts in a way that their message will come through. I'm putting this out there. You can agree with me or not agree with me, but what we're going to do is read the 3 different sources describing the end of the last few days of the temple standing erect and Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leaving Jerusalem. Now, as I said, totally, it's clear that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai did leave Jerusalem. We know he's in Yavne. So at some point, he definitely left. But our stories are telling us when he left, why he left, how he left, and what happened when he got to the other side. So the 3 stories that we're going to read, in certain ways, are going to be very, very similar to each other. But Mashe Ma'anyen Oti is not what is similar between them. Lo hadome el hashoneh. What's interesting to me is not how the stories are similar to each other, but rather how the stories are different from each other, and what I can learn from this about the ideology of the person writing these stories. The 3 sources we're going to read are pretty much written more or less at the same time. Perhaps Avot de Natan is a little bit later. And the three sources are the Gemara in Masechet Gitin. In Masechet Gitin, we have a very, very long stretch of Agadot, a couple of pages long, which are known as the Agadot HaChurban, the Midrashim, or the tales of destruction. And the Gemara, for pages and pages, brings us different sources of different anecdotes or stories about the destruction. One of them is the one we're going to read. The second source is Icha Rabbah. Icha Rabbah is part of Midrash Rabbah, which most of it is a Midrash, a running Midrash on the Torah, written in different times. Midrash Bereshit Rabbah is written in the Talmudic times. Let's say Bamidbar Rabbah is written in the 12th or 13th century. They're not made of one skin. However, one of the Midrashim, besides having a Midrash on the 5 books of Torah, Bereshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, V'Dvarim, we also have Midrash Rabbah on the different Megillot. One of the Megillot that we have a Midrash about is Midrash on Megillat Eicha, which we read on Tisha B'Av, and that's a Midrash pretty much like Midrash Rabbah, goes pasuk by pasuk, describing different commentaries about the pasuk, and again going on tangents related to this. The third source is Avot de Natan, the topic of our course here. All three sources are dealing with the same time and place, and we're going to now read the sources. They're not very short. I apologize, but they are kind of repetitive in the sense that many of them are talking about exactly the same point, and therefore, once we read one and once we read one, we can definitely move on to the others. So let me just open it a second. No, wrong one. Where did it go? Okay. I'll share the screen here so you can all see it as well. Okay, so I'm actually going to start with the one from Eicha Rabbah because it's most elaborate and unique. And once we see the full picture, we can then see what parts were taken in and what wasn't by the other two sources. So I'm just going to read through Eicha Rabbah. It's a lot to take in. I'll try to do it as slowly as possible, but you have the sources in front of you as well. The Midrash starts with the statement, Shalosh Shanim V'Mechza Hikif Vespasianus et Yerushalayim. For 3.5 years, Vespasian surrounded Jerusalem or sieged Jerusalem. Wasn't a proper siege, but he was on attack. Dukasim, there were 4 governors with him. The governor of Arabia, the governor of Africa, the governor of Alexandria, and the governor of Palestine. Regarding the governor of Arabia, there's a dispute. One says his name was Kilus, and one says his name was Pangar. And then, line 3, at the same time, Havun b'Yerushalayim arba shirim. There were 4 noblemen in Jerusalem, and they mention their names, Ben Tzitzit, Ben Gurion, Ben Nakdimon, Ben Kalbas Savua. We know these names from other sources as well. They're always depicted as very, very rich people. Kol echad ve'echad yechol lesapek mezonot shel medina 10 shanim. Each one was capable of providing sustenance for the entire city of Jerusalem for 10 years. That means that even if the Romans will put Jerusalem into a siege, there shouldn't be a problem. There's enough food in Jerusalem to last for 40 years. And there was, line 4, there was a person called Ben Batiach. He's the son of the sister of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, our hero. And he was appointed over all the storehouses. And what did he do? He burnt all the storehouses. He burned down all the storehouses of Jerusalem, leaving Jerusalem with no food whatsoever. Shamar Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai hears this and he says, Vai. Vai is like in modern Hebrew. Oy vey. What happened here? Tattletales went and told Ben Baticha, your uncle said, woe is us, Vai. So he calls him over, Shalach vivio, v'amar lo, lama amarta Vai? Why did you say woe? He said, me? I didn't say woe. I rather said va, or in modern English, wow. I didn't say oy vey. I said, wow, great. But he tells him, the nephew says, you said, but if you said wow, why did you say wow? And he said, line 10, because you burnt all the storehouses, and I said, as long as the storehouses are intact, they will not risk their lives to engage in battle. And therefore, I was agreeing with you. If you want the Jews to rebel against the Romans, you need to take them out of their comfort zone. As long as they think they have enough food to survive, they will not rebel. Kol hakavod that you burnt down everything, and now people will truly rebel. I hope you realized Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is blatantly lying to his nephew. He really said, oy vey. He really did not want anyone burning down the food of Jerusalem. But he's clearly petrified of his nephew. And therefore, when his nephew calls him out and says, why were you upset? He said, me upset? I'm not upset. I'm happy. I agree with you. But he's really upset. And line 11, Ben vai leva, between the oy vey and the great, Rabbi Yochanan escaped. And that's what they applied about to him, the pasuk, Yitaron da'at ha'chokhmah techayeh ba'aleh. Knowledge will persevere the life of its possessors. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was smart enough to get away. לאחר ג' ימים, יצא רבן יוחנן בן זכאי לטייל בשוק, וראה אותם ששורקים תבן ושותים מימיו. אמר, בני אדם ששורקים תבן ושותים מימיו יכולים לעמוד בחילותיו של אספסיאנוס? 3 days later, after the big burn, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is going out to the marketplace, and he sees people boiling straw and drinking the broth, because they have no food. And he said, people who boil straw and drink it, they're going to fight? Impossible. And then he said, it's a priority of me to get out of here. I'm stopping for a second. And now we read the impetus of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Why did Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leave Jerusalem? Because a terrible thing happened. They burnt all the food. Burning all the food was a tragedy, said Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. But why is it a tragedy? Because if there's no food, how are they going to fight? And he says to himself, my nephew did a tactical mistake. He thought that burning the food will give impetus to the people to fight, not realizing that with no food, they won't be able to fight. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai says, I need to get out of here. Scene 1. Scene 2. Shalach ve'amar leben batiach. He sends a message to his nephew, saying, get me out of here. And surprisingly, the nephew agrees. Ben Batiach says to him, but we have agreed that no one's going to leave. We have an agreement among us that no person may emerge from the the city unless he's dead. So says Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, get me out as the guise of someone who died. I'm willing to be dead. Let me act dead. I managed to act and convince you that I'm for you. Now I'm willing to act again dead as well. And indeed, he lies down and feigning his own death. And he's being carried out in line 17. Rabbi Eliezer carries him by the head. Rabbi Yoshua is carrying by his feet. And Ben Batiach, the nephew, is walking before them. And they arrive to the walls. And they start, the guards want to say, oh, he's dead? Let me check he's dead. I want to stab him to see he's really dead. And Ben Batiach said, what? You're going to stab him? They're going to say what kind of barbarians are. They will say the rabbi died and they stabbed him. So he managed to convince the guards, and once the nephew said that, the guards indeed left Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai for dead, and he is being taken out of Jerusalem. כאשר יצאו מהחומות, שמו אותו בבית הקברות אחד וחזרו לעיר. They dropped him off at the cemetery, and they ran back to the town, to the city, leaving Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai alone in the cemetery. End of scene 2. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai left Jerusalem. Scene 3, line 21. יצא רבן יוחנן בן זכאי לטייל בחילותיו של אספסיאנוס. Now, outside of the city is Vesapian's troops. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Jew from the city, is walking around between the soldiers. And they're all asking him, who are you? And he says, take me to your leader. Where's the king? And they went and told Vespasian, a certain Jew wishes to inquire after your well-being. And he said, let him come. And he says, when he walks in, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai says, long live my lord the emperor. Vespasian at this point is not emperor. And another point of history that we do know is that Vespasian was sent by Nero to attack the Jews. But then Nero commits suicide and dies. And that year starts the year that is known as the year of the four emperors. The fourth emperor is Vespasian. But that didn't happen yet. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai sees him, he's still near Jerusalem, and he says, long live my lord the emperor. And he says to him, you greet me with a greeting of a king, but I'm not a king. And if the king will hear of it, he will kill me. So says to him, Rabbi Yochanan, in line 27, if you are not king, ultimately you will be reign. How do I know? Because the temple cannot be destroyed unless it's a king who's destroying it. And since you're about to destroy the temple, clearly you're the king. Lekacho. Okay, and end of scene 3, the meeting between Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and Vespasian. Lekacho, then line 28, he puts him in jail, and he hides him in a room with 7 drapes, that he will not be able to see the light from outside. And every so often he says, what time is it at night? What time is it at day? And Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai knew exactly how it was. How did he know it? Line 29, it was from his studies. He knew how to tell time, even without seeing the sun or the moon. 30 days later, Aspasianus goes to a fresh spring called Gafna, and when he gets there, he gets off his, comes out of the spring, he tries to put on his shoes, he puts on one shoe. While he's busy tying the one shoe, a messenger comes and says, Nero died, and the citizens of Rome crowned you king. And he sought to put the other shoe on, and he was not able to tie on the other shoe. Didn't fit. Now, this is very perplexing, because he had 2 shoes when he walked in. He managed to wear both. Why is he only managing to wear now one? So he can't figure it out. And he says, bring that smart Jew and let's ask him. He sends for Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he's brought and says, can you explain this? All my life I wear these 2 shoes and suddenly can only wear one. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said, you had, in line 32, you received good tidings, and therefore, good tidings, like the Pasuk in Mishlei says, fatten the bone. And therefore, when you put on the first shoe, you were still only a warrior. Now you're emperor, you got full of yourself, the shoe no longer fits. It's the opposite of the Cinderella story. So he tells them, what should I do? And he says, find someone you really don't like. And then once you see him, your mood will dampen and therefore the shoe will fit. And then they start going into a conversation. And I know the story is almost finished, but let's read the conversation. They start telling each other fables or parables. And first question is, what should one do with a barrel which has a snake in which a snake is nested? Now, you have a barrel filled with wine, and you have a snake inside. What should you do? So, Pangar, if you remember Pangar from the beginning, he's one of the four governors. He said, in order to kill the snake and break the barrel, I mean, your goal is to kill the snake. You have to pay the price of the barrel, or else you'll never get to the snake. Question number 2. Migdal shekinen bo nachash kitzad osim, line 37. What should I do with a cabinet that has a snake in it? And so, sorry. Oh, sorry, I skipped the line before. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai answered, if you have a snake in your barrel, it's in line 35, you should bring a snake charmer and let him charm the snake out, and this way leave the barrel intact. And Pangar says, what are you talking about? Just break the bloody barrel. Question 2, what if you have a snake inside your cupboard? Again, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai says, bring in line 37, bring a snake charmer, charm the snake, and leave the cabinet intact. And Paragana says, no, break it. You have to kill the snake, you have to break the cabinet. You understand that this really is a question of, what do I do with the temple? We have the temple, and we have certain rebels within the temple who are stopping us from moving ahead. What should I do? And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying, get a snake charmer and get rid of the rebels, but leave the temple intact. And Pangar is saying, no, you have to break both. You cannot separate the snake from the wine, from the barrel, or the snake from the cupboard, or the rebels from the temple. They're one and the same, and therefore, if you want to get rid of the snake, you have to get rid of the temple. So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai keeps trying to avoid it, and Pangar keeps trying to get in his way. Says Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in line 39 to Pangar, all neighbors who perform evil perform it in their own neighborhood. Not only do you not fail to plead in our favor, you speak to our detriment. You are in charge of Arabia. We're part of Arabia. Why are you trying to mess us up instead of speaking in our favor? And Pangar says, I'm doing it for the best of you. It's for your best interest. As long as the temple is intact, the kingdoms will continue to harass you. Once the temple is destroyed, then they'll leave you alone. It's a kind of a explanation of anti-Semitism. As long as you're a Zionist, there'll be anti-Semitism. Give up on Zion, there won't be anti-Semitism, suggests Pangar. And says Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the heart knows whether it is constructive or destructive. Le'ekel or la'kalkalot. Okay, end of this scene. And now we get to one of the last scene, line 42. Amar le'Aspasianu to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Sh'ali she'ela v'ani aseh. We have a long relationship. Ask whatever you want. I'll do it. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai says, I want you to leave. Go away. Go back to Rome. Leave Israel alone. And he says to him, line 44, what, did the citizens of Rome crown me so I would leave the city? I can't do that. That's too much asked. So make a different request and I'll grant it. And he says, okay, the request is, at least when you destroy the city, leave the western side alone. Conquer the city from all different sides, but leave, when you attack from 3 different sides: north, west, north, east, and south. Don't attack from the west. Why? I want anyone this way. If you leave the gate on the western side, anyone who wants to go towards the city of Lod, they can run away. Well, the western gate is what we call today Shar Yafo. It's the way that goes westwards. So we call it Shar Yafo because it led to the city of Yafo. He's calling it Shar Lod because it goes to the city of Lod. But he's saying, let the people of Jerusalem run away. And indeed, when the city was conquered, after Vespasian conquered it, he said to him, if you have anyone you specifically want me to save, tell me and I'll save that specific person from the city. And indeed, he tells them, take out Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, send to bring a person called Rabbi Tzadok, someone we don't know much about. And indeed, they bring out Rabbi Tzadok and they bring him to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. And Aspasanus looks at him and says, this old thing is what you wanted? He's so old and frail. And he said, you should know, if there was another one of them, you wouldn't be able to conquer the city. And he says, what is his great strength? And he says he can eat one fruit, and that sustains him for a time to learn 100 different chapters. And why is he so kachush, so emaciated? He said because he fasts so much about Jerusalem. And he brings the medicine, and I'm gonna stop reading because it's been so long. And I'll just say the end of the story is that they heal Rabbi Tzadok, and Rabbi Tzadok manages to teach them some geometry. And then Pangar, because he did disservice to the king, he left the western wall that we know, he left it intact. The king eventually asked him to kill himself. End of the story. Now, I know we took in a lot, and it took quite a while to read it as well. I want to ask very, very specific questions. And you can refer back to the sources as I'm talking. What irked Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai? What troubled him? And I think anyone reading Eicha Rabbah, the answer is clear. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is a man of the people. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is worried about the destruction of the people of Jerusalem, not the destruction of the temple. The temple is almost lo manyan. He doesn't speak about the temple. He doesn't require the temple. He also doesn't speak about Jewish continuity. He's specifically worried about the people of Jerusalem. Now, how do I know that? Because the impetus for Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai to leave is he sees the people of Jerusalem starving. And he says, they won't survive it. And my nephew, the hothead, thinks that he will move them into action and fighting, and there won't be any food, then they'll start fighting. They were not able to do it. And I need to worry about these people. And he manages to get on the good side of the king. And when the king finally comes up with, what's my, ask anything you want. And he says, the only thing I want is to leave everybody away. Leave them alone. And the king says, that's not going to happen. So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai says, so at least let them run away. I know you have to conquer Jerusalem. I know there's nothing to talk about. Conquer the city. Don't conquer the people. And that's why the Pangar, the conversation with that Pangar, which, by the way, many researchers think that it's an analogy for Christian leaders. The analogy is Pangar is saying the temple and the Jews are one and the same. You can't separate them. Now, if the Jews are giving you trouble, you have to destroy the temple. If the temple is giving you the trouble, you have to destroy the Jews. You cannot separate the snake from the wine. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said, sure you can. Separate. Deal with the problem and leave the rest alone. Now, the rest could be the temple, the rest could be the people, but separate like you know how to do. Divide and conquer. Divide. Divide the Jews from the temple, divide the rebels from the peace, the lovers. Divide. It's not all one unit. And what Pangar is saying is they are. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying they're not. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is worried about the Jews of Yerushalayim. I want to contrast this very, very hopefully briefly with two other sources. The one source is the famous Maran Gittin. Why is it so famous? You'll hear in a second. But it pretty much, and I'm going back to I said the three sources have agreement about many things. They both know Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leaves Jerusalem. They both know Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai feigns death in order to get out of Jerusalem. We all know that. I mean, the story with the shoes is in both stories. Rabbi Tzadok is in both stories. There are many, many attributes of the stories that are similar, almost identical. But I want to point out the differences. Therefore, I'm going to skip around a little bit, and I will read here. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leaves Jerusalem, and when he asked why he wants to leave Jerusalem, and he says, here I'm reading the end of line 8, and he says, I want to leave Jerusalem so it be possible that there will be a small salvation. I know we're going to be destroyed. My goal is to have something left. And Rabban Yochanan, according to the Gemara in Gittin, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is leaving Jerusalem because he wants to save something. What does he want to save? And I'm skipping to the point where he gets to the king and asks what he wants. So you see here in line 11 and 12, we have the same type of questions. What happens if you have the snake and etc.? It's pretty much intact the same conversation. And when I get to line 16, Vesapian says to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'll be going to Rome to accept my new position, and I will send someone else in to be in my place to continue the siege on the city and waging the war against it. We know that he will send his son Titus. But before I leave, ask something that I can give you. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, give me Yavne and its sages, and do not destroy it, and spare the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel, and do not kill them, as if they were rebels. And lastly, give me doctors to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, in the story in Masechet Gittin, speaks about three things. Three things are, I want Yavne, I want Rabban Gamliel, the president, and I want Rabbi Tzadok. If you remember the class from last week, we have three crowns, Keter Torah, Keter Kehuna, and Keter Malchut. He's asking Keter Torah, I want Yavne, the city of Yavne and its sages. I want Keter Malchut, I want Rabban Gamliel. And I want Keter Kehuna, Rabbi Tzadok. In a sense, what Rabban Gamliel is doing, he's exactly what he said he would do. I want to save something. I can't have Kehuna because I don't have a temple. I can have a Kohen. I can't have the Sanhedrin of Yerushalayim. I can have Yahweh and Chachamea. I can't have full reign of Medinat Israel, of Eretz Israel, because the Romans are here, but at least I can still have a president, Rabban Gamliel. He's trying to save what he can, and in fact, that fits very much what we know about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai and elsewhere. He's trying to replace Jerusalem in its glory. Well, like what we call when the Gemara, based on the pasuk in Yechezkel, speaks about shul, it calls it a bet mikdash me'at. It's a little bet mikdash. It's a bet mikdash leh. Rabban Gamliel is trying to do that. As Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is trying to do that. I know I can't have everything, but let me get something. And in that something,
could this possibly be the regel achas missing that Hillel didn't require from the Ger?
Interesting. Okay. So Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is trying to get something out. Now, listen to the difference between that really long story that we read in Echaraba. You should read the story, which is pretty long in Gittin as well, but his focal point is different. Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in Echaraba is trying to save people. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai Masechet Gittin is trying to save a semblance of what we had. And our triumph, our trivart of three-legged world, where you have Keter Torah, Keter Melucha, and Keter Kohuna, I want to save a semblance of that, creating a new realm, which I spoke about at length in the beginning. He is creating a new focal point for Judaism, which doesn't have a Beit HaMikdash. And Rabban Gamliel is saying, I know I'm doing that, but I'm very futuristically looking at it. And I'm not looking at the past because the past is gone. I'm looking at the future. And often when people speak about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that is the most striking thing about his ability to really have farsight into the future and create a Judaism that we continue to practice today. And it's all due to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's innovation. But that is Masechet Gittin's version. The Eichar Rabba's version was totally different. He wanted to save people. And I want to look now at Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is the third source on your sheet. And also, similar story, similar attributes. We have Rabbi Tzadok, we have the shoe, very, very similar to each other. But listen to the beginning of the conversation. I'm reading from line 1. Shabas Vasianus, when Vespasian came to destroy Jerusalem, Vespasian tells them, fools! Why do you seek to destroy the city and burn your holy temple? What do I request of you, says the Roman emperor? Give me one bow and one arrow as a sign of your surrender, and I will let you be. Just surrender. And they say, what are you talking about? We're not going to surrender. You can hear the hotheads of Yerushalayim saying, we fought the Greeks, we'll fight you too. Line 4, when Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai heard this, he sent for the men of Jerusalem and he said to them, my children, why do you seek to destroy the city and burn the holy temple? For what did we ask for? Just a bow and an arrow. Surrender. And then he would leave you be. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is quoting verbatim Vesapian. He's quoting verbatim. Just surrender, and we'll have the temple. And the people of Jerusalem did not listen. And then Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, look at line 6. The sapien has men lurking within the walls of Jerusalem, and everything that they heard, they would write on an arrow and send over the wall intelligence, and they reported that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai supported the Caesar. When Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai tries to convince them 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and they didn't listen, he says, I need to go surrender myself. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai crosses over, he feigns death, they take him out, it's that whole story that you know, and he gets to the king, and in line 14, he arrives at the king, and the king said, line 14, you're Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai? Ask whatever you wish. Why? I know you're loyal. Now, in the story in Gittin and in the story of Echai Rabbah, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had to convince the king it's worthwhile giving him promises. And he did it through his wisdom. Here, the king already knows he should give him whatever he wants because he knows Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is loyal. And he says in line 15, Eini mevakesh mimcha el hayavne, she'elech ve'eshne ba letalmidai, ve'ekba batfila, ve'eseh ba kol mitzvot. And he says, all I want is, let me be a firm Jew in Yavne. Now, you know, the Romans didn't let people be from Jews. And he says, just let me go to Yavne, and I can learn and keep mitzvot and daven. I want religious freedom. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is surrendering. And he says, I know that I really would have loved to surrender everything and have the temple. But if I can't have the temple, let me at least be a firm Jew outside. Note that he's not asking for Yavne v'chachamea. He's not asking for establishing a new realm and making Tanaim and changing the focal point of Judaism and being farsighted. I know I lost. Let me just keep mitzvot. And then we have the story that he tells him he's going to be the emperor. But at the and then we have the story of destruction, and I'm going to read this, and it's very sad. Reading line 21. When Jerusalem was taken, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was sitting and waiting, and he trembled before God, just as Eli sat and watched, as it says in Shmuel. And there's a comparison here between Eli seeing the destruction of the Mishkan in Shiloh and Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai sitting in Jerusalem, outside of Jerusalem, and watching the burning of the city. כיוון ששמע רבן יוחנן בן זכאי שהחריב את המקדש, when Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, line 22, heard that Jerusalem was destroyed and the holy temple was burning in flames, he tore his clothes, and his students tore their clothes, and they cried and screamed and lamented, as it said, etc., etc., etc. When this story ends, you suddenly say, hey, this was missing from the other stories. In the other stories, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai achieved his goal, albeit saving the people of Jerusalem that they can run away to Lod, albeit getting Yavne v'Chachamea. But suddenly you realize that you haven't heard about the temple being destroyed. And only when you read it in Avot ben Natan, you say, what did Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai feel about his failure? And that is the third focal point. The story in Avot ben Natan is saying, you cannot talk about Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai leaving Jerusalem without talking about he wanted to surrender and have a Bet HaMikdash, and he wasn't able to. And therefore, when the Mikdash was destroyed, he cries, he laments, he tears his clothes, he's in mourning because he failed. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in the other stories succeeded on one level or other. In the third one, he failed. And if I go back to the title I started with, again, I don't think that we know historically what happened. We have three different depictions of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, and we have three different vantage points of telling the story. One is Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the humanist, who's just worried about the people. I don't care about Yerushalayim. I don't care about the Mikdash. I care about people. Save people. And he succeeded because the Romans allowed for the people, at least according to the story, allowed for the people to run away to Lot. And we know that even after Jerusalem was destroyed, Judaism continued in Eretz Israel, at least till the Bar Kokhba revolt, which is 60 years later. The Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai succeeded in saving people. But you hear the person penning this story saying, the only thing that's chashuv li is anashim. Lo ideologia. I'm not interested in ideology. I'm not interested in a temple. I'm interested in people. You can hear it now in modern Israel. Chatufim. Leave me all the other conversations. Chatufim. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in the Rabbah is interested in people, and he was successful. And was the temple destroyed? Yes, but that's not my point. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in Masechet Gittin realizes he's losing Israel in its glory, but at least let me give something else in return. Give me Yavne v'Chachamea, give me Rabban Gamliel, give me Rabbi Tzadok, give me something to latch on to. And again, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was successful. The story in Avot Rabbi Natan sees Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai interested in the temple. And the only thing he's really interested in is saving the temple. And he was not successful. And two things happened when he realized he's not going to be successful. One is he said, okay, just let me have beer from Jew without a temple. And the second, when the temple is destroyed, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai himself was destroyed as well. And he starts crying. And the third story, the story of Avot Rabbi Natan, is, I believe, temple-oriented, and one that perhaps when we think about the 3 weeks now that we just started this Sunday, that's why I chose this topic now, is we talk about the chisaron of Bet HaMikdash. That's what we always focus on. And these three sources are saying, really, is that what you need to focus on? Avot Rabbi Natan will say yes. The other two will say, maybe you should be asking different questions. Maybe what you should be mourning isn't the temple, but people. Maybe what can you save? Don't look at the past, but look at the future. And the three tales being told based on the Khurban are giving very different directions. I know it's almost 1 minute to 9, but if anybody has a quick question, I'm happy to hear.
Yeah, I'd like to know whether you think that the story of Hillel telling the ger the Torah standing on one leg, whether that's a leg without the avodah.
I mean, I think that it's pretty clear, right? I mean, like he took away that statement of he pretty much said the only important thing, like Rabbi Akiva said, is V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And the rest of the Torah is an extrapolation of interpersonal relationships. Rabbi Akiva said it, Hillel, and in the story Hillel is saying it, and definitely very little room for avodah. But I mean, there are many, many sources speaking about what to do once the destruction of the temple and what's the replacement of the avodah. I think that these two sources are pointing out that the replacement of avodat korbanot is interpersonal relationship. I think that's pretty clear.
Rabbi Slotnik, I want to thank you for fabulous teaching. It's been so wonderful. And I particularly appreciate your reframing or giving us an extra meaning to the word center, right? That the center of Judaism not only shifted from Jerusalem to Yavne, but the focus shifted. I had never put that together before, and I thought that was terrific.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. טוב, אז שיהיה לכולם לילה טוב. יום טוב, for me לילה טוב.
Thank you.